Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It's 6:07. Thanks for tuning in here on this first day of October. I know that you're all freaking out. Because, wait, what am I saying? This isn't a CNN audience. You guys know the rules with a government shutdown. You're not freaking out at all. Everything's fine. We've been down this road before. The difference here is that it appears the Democrats already recognize that they are on the losing end of this equation. They're way behind the eight ball on the politics of it. That's why both Julie Gunlock and I think this is not going to be a very long, protracted affair. But we'll see. We'll see how things go. But if you want news, analysis, information, and the latest on what's happening with the government shutdown, you want to keep it right here on this radio station. Not only will we cover it for you, but of course Chris Plant, Vince Columnist, Derek Hunter, all throughout the day. This morning, we've got Cal Thomas coming up in 30 minutes. 7:05, Chris Pabst of Fox 45 Baltimore. 7:35, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Schaefer. 8:05, Leland Vittert. And then at 8:35, Susan Ferriccio. Julie Gunlock, good morning to you.
Good morning.
And mentioned in the first hour, but, you know, we are, I think it's fair to say, most sensitive to employees of companies and contractors who do business with the federal government, but are not necessarily protected by all of the federal employee largesse that has been built into the system over the years, like your husband, Julie, who
Sure.
works for a company who right now it appears is not affected by the shutdown, but might be
Right.
in some
Any
way.
contractor.
And
yeah.
those people, the contractors, don't get much of a voice during all of these histrionics at all.
Of course. Right.
And so we hear you, and we're not, not making light of the situation. And if it sounds like we're being crass when we just shoot this through the lens of politics, just recognize that's the nature of this story. It is political. And sadly, there are political forces who want you to go through hell because they want you to get angry at one side or the other. We don't want that. We want this resolved, and we want the grown-ups to get back and do their work. Right now, the grown-ups seem to be the Republicans who have got their bills all ready to go, and Democrats saying, no. We want $1.5 trillion instead. We'll cover it, and we'll talk about it as the morning goes on and as the next several days go on. Yesterday, while Congress was still working, one of the final hearings in the United States Senate had to do with crime. And I want you to hear a little bit of this. A lot of it involves Washington, D.C. And here are the people who were on the panel, by the way. Forlesia Cook, a grandmother of Marty William McMillan, who was murdered in Washington, D.C., and the murderer was just, got off with a slap on the wrist. William Enyart, retired Major General in the United States Army. Greg Pemberton, friend of this program, chairman of the D.C. Police Union. Brent Taylor, Tennessee State Senator out of Nashville. And then Gregory Jackson Jr., former Deputy Director of the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention. It is with Mr. Jackson Jr. that Josh Hawley had a memorable exchange. Take a listen. It's cut 12.
Comprehensive approach is defunding the police, which is what this says. The entire time. This is so typical of what the Democrats do now. After your policies have transparently failed and led to the deaths of millions of Americans, now you say you've never heard of defunding the police. Your own report recommends it on page after page after page. Let me ask about something else you say. Here's what you say we ought to invest in. Instead of funding the police, here's what we ought to invest in. We need to invest in programs that acknowledge the need for safe space initiatives led by lesbian, gay, bisexual, two-spirit, trans, and gender nonconforming people. What's two-spirit?
Well, look, I don't know exactly. You guys are pulling some interesting quotes.
This
here.
is from your report.
If you look at the report, the focus is on investing in violence intervention, outreach workers.
What is you say that you shouldn't invest in the police, but we ought to invest in two-spirit community programs that acknowledge two-spirit individuals.
We are not going to discriminate
what is that?
We're not going to discriminate against any nonprofit that
what
wants
is
to help
two-spirit?
us prevent violence in
what
our
is
community.
two-spirit? You say don't fund the police, but do fund programs that create safe spaces for two-spirit people. What is? I just want to know. I don't know what that is. I have no idea what that is.
Well, I honestly, I'm not completely aware of the language or the
you wrote
spirit
the
of how that was
report.
written. But what I'm telling you is that
what is a two-spirit individual? I mean, really, this is your policymaker's playbook. You are the witness called by the Democrats on this committee, so I assume you reflect their views. Well, you don't want to fund the police. You want to fund safe spaces for two-spirit individuals. What is a two-spirit person?
I feel like I'm looking at a two-faced individual because you talk about reducing
no, sir.
violence.
You're looking at somebody who's reading you your own words, and I'd like to hear an answer.
Programs.
Here's the answer. The answer is you don't have any solutions. You want to invest in gobbledygook and take away money from police officers who actually keep our communities safe, and when you're called on the record, you deny it.
Thank you, Senator Hawley. That was such a perfect moment to describe the years we've been through under Obama and Biden, focusing on this
arrogance
garbage.
of that guy. The arrogance. Well, you guys are just pulling out crazy stuff. No, this is a quote from your report that you wrote.
The report.
You're right. It's crazy.
He still hasn't been able to answer the question, what's two-spirit people, but we know that they're deserving of government funding instead of law enforcement.
That's right.
Because that's the crime. And the fact that the Biden administration even had somebody who was the director of the Office of Gun Violence Prevention. Hey, I've got a solution for gun violence prevention. If people own or use a gun illegally, throw them in jail.
Yeah, actually enforce the
law. That will
law.
Prevent gun violence.
You could try enforcing the law. I don't know.
Enforce the law. Greg Pemberton, union boss here in D.C., talked about how these laws have hampered not just recruiting for cops, but also allowing those cops who are wearing the badge and showing up every day for work from actually doing their job. And every time anything comes up about law enforcement and support for law enforcement, all the left ever wants to do is talk about January 6th. That's a strategy. That's a political tactic. And Greg Pemberton blew the whistle on it. Cut 13.
When President Donald Trump gave a full and unconditional pardon to 1,500 individuals who had been prosecuted for violence against police officers.
Well, it's frustrating to see that, but what I point to is since that day, since January 7th, 2021, through today, we've had 1,537 officers injured where someone has assaulted a police officer, and 95% of those cases have been no-papered by the U.S. Attorney's Office. So, yes, it's frustrating to have officers who are assaulted, but the vast majority of those people that assaulted officers that day were arrested and charged, and many of them convicted.
I'm asking about the full and unconditional pardon by the president. Your reaction to that?
My reaction is that it's more frustrating to have suspects who assault police officers who are arrested by cops and have that case no-papered by a U.S. Attorney's Office than it is to have people who are convicted of crimes and spend years in jail and later be pardoned.
I guess I don't follow you. You're saying that since there were assaults.
I think we've heard enough. We know that Dick Durbin doesn't follow. So
Yeah,
it was it was meant to be a gotcha moment on Trump. It's like, you represent law officers. I want your reaction to the pardon of those people who violently attacked police officers on January 6th. And Greg Pemberton says, yeah, I guess that's bad. But guess what? Since January 7th, over 1,500 cops have been assaulted on the job, and the Justice Department under Biden did nothing about it.
That's right.
It's beautiful. All right, a little bit more from yesterday's hearing, including a very powerful moment from a grieving grandmother whose grandson was murdered in Washington, D.C., and the murderer, well, we'll tell you what happened.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
Your next $1,000 could be one text away. It's $5K a day on WMAL.
Hearing yesterday in the United States Senate about crime, law and order, not putting bad guys away in prison, letting them walk on cashless bail, not funding the police. I want to just check in with Senator Hawley from Missouri to see if he's ever gotten an answer to this question. Cut 12A, how are we doing over there?
Here's what you say we ought to invest in. Instead of funding the police, here's what we ought to invest in. We need to invest in programs that acknowledge the need for safe space initiatives led by lesbian, gay, bisexual, two-spirit, trans, and gender nonconforming people. What's two-spirit?
Still no answer. I don't believe he's ever gotten a straight answer.
Nope.
What's two-spirit?
Still
By the way, if you are wondering what Two-Spirit is, it's this buzzword that the DEI LGBTQ plus types use to acknowledge the Native Americans who are supposedly inherently transgender as well. They, men who like to walk around looking like Sacagawea. I don't know. But the term Two-Spirit was invented. They make it sound like it goes back to the, pre-Columbus 16th century, indigenous people. No, some college gender studies professor 2 decades ago invented the term. It's meaningless.
It's meaningless, and that is why when you're asked directly about it, when these people they sort of write these things into these reports, and then when they're asked directly about it, they don't know what they're talking about. No one does.
It's amazing. This guy, this head of Biden's, gun violence prevention, which, by the way, he should have started with Hunter Biden's crimes against federal gun laws.
Let's start
That would have been a good place to start. Gregory Jackson Jr. It's just so great to see people like that getting called out. I'm surprised that when the testimony began, he said, "Senator, before I answer your question, I would like to acknowledge that this hearing is taking place on stolen land."
Right. I was expecting that as well. Hawley is relentless. That is one thing I will say. He is relentless. He's part of this new breed of Republican that isn't taking any crap, isn't cowed by these politically correct people. It's great. It's great to watch. It's great viewing.
It is great, and it satisfies your need for some kind of political pushback on the nonsense that we've been living through. But the most important part of the hearing yesterday is to see the very real human cost of these policies, not just the degradation of basics of Western civilization that we've been forced to accept. Like, oh, there's nothing wrong with a mentally ill person living in their own feces on the sidewalk, and if you raise an objection, you're a bigot. It's been awful what our society has had to endure for the sake of these politically motivated monsters who have decided that basic law and order and sanitary rules don't apply anymore, and we can allow the nightmare that has been wrought on our major cities in America to just go unabated. But you forget sometimes the tragedy involved in these laws, all funded by George Soros, by the way, and left-wing activist groups, in the name of I don't know what, other than to tear down our country. Well, listen to this woman. This grandmother in Washington, D.C., testified before the Senate to remind them what really happens. This is Forlicia Cook. Take a listen.
He shot my grandson in cold blood 7 times. And they didn't consider that as first-degree murder. They act like we would be lucky if we got manslaughter. The bottom line is that murder in D.C. is treated as a joke when it comes time to justice.
It's Forlicia Cook. And for all of the left-wing social policy, social justice, we have a racist criminal justice system, Black Lives Matter, George Floyd protesters who decided to upend our basic understandings of law and order and crime and punishment under the obscene banner of Black Lives Matter, while Forlicia Cook's grandson was murdered and shot 7 times and doesn't even have the dignity of basic justice in our system. Yeah, you know what? I agree that Black lives definitely matter. What about that Black life?
Just a shout out to Senate Judiciary Committee staff who often have to find these people, have to interview these people, and have to bring these people in to these hearings. What a wonderful woman, and what a brave woman to get up there and tell that story in front of those senators. So really good job to those Senate staffers who found who found that woman in that tragic story, because she needs to be heard.
And the fact that every member of the D.C. Council will look at that woman and walk away feeling like they've done a good job, that they've done a superior job and a righteous job in running this city, and demand statehood on a daily basis, they should all resign in shame. It's 6:23.
Coming up, it's cow time. Keep it here. It's 6:30.
WMAL-FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station. Making sense of the news. News Talk 105.9. WMAL. News now. Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
The government has been shut down for 6 hours and 37 minutes. It's 6:37. Good morning. Welcome to O'Connor and Company. So far, everything seems to be relatively normal in Washington, D.C. That's relative, of course. Coming up at 7:05, Chris Pabst of Baltimore's Fox 45 about a growing scandal out of Annapolis under Governor Wes Moore and the waste or misuse of $219 million. What's $219 million among friends? 7:35 brings us Lieutenant Colonel Tony Schaefer on yesterday's speech at Quantico by the President and the Secretary of War. 8:05, Leland Vittert of News Nation, and 8:35, Susan Friccio, Washington Times. It's Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning.
Cal Thomas has seen his share of government shutdowns. And it's a funny thing about a government shutdown, Cal. I've noticed this over the years. You've got a little bit, a few more years on me than I. I don't know if that is grammatically correct, but give me a break. I've only had 3 coffees. Cal, here's the thing about government shutdowns. The government doesn't actually shut down, does it?
No, it's all phony. It's bad political theater, Larry. And welcome to Mr. October, by the way. It was only 18 years ago that Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich got together and created the Balanced Budget Act. And believe it or not, the deal resulted in 4 consecutive years of budget surpluses. But the big spenders came back like drug dealers from Venezuela, and they addicted people to more and more government, and that's why we have a $37 trillion debt. It's not complicated. You say, well, math wasn't your best subject in school. Neither was mine. But I can count, and $37 trillion in only 18 years is irresponsible, and it's disgusting. But people keep voting for these people, and so they're going to keep spending. But what we need is somebody to stand up, more than somebody to stand up in Congress and have hearings and continue this DOGE business, which exposed a lot of this waste, fraud, and abuse. Did you know, and I just found this out, that more than 27% of all federal spending is focused on health care. Now, we ought to be focused on physical fitness, as RFK Jr. has said, and then we'll have less need of health care.
Well, Cal, sorry, Larry, but
a quick rejoinder. You're right, Cal, and that's why Obamacare. We all warned about Obamacare because as soon as you get the government involved in our health care expenditures, now your visit to the doctor or a hospital, the MRI, becomes a line item on a budget that the likes of Jerry Nadler is going to vote on. You don't want Jerry Nadler making decisions about your health care, and that's why we've got all these expenses. I'm sorry, Julie,
look at the NHS in the UK. I mean, sometimes you have to wait months to get an appointment with a doctor. Socialized medicine, government running almost anything doesn't work. Whatever happened to the individual and personal responsibility? We can't go on like this.
Well, Cal, talking about personal responsibility, that's exactly what Pete Hegseth, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, said yesterday to the very group of people who are expected to be physically fit. And of course, then the narrative from the media and from all these people out there, The View and others, were, he's fat shaming. I mean, we should expect our military brass, especially, to be in top physical shape. Is this fat shaming, Cal?
No, of course it isn't. I mean, I was in the Army. We had to do certain things, had our hair cut. Even Elvis had his hair cut. Now, look, if Elvis can have his hair cut, so can the rest of us. Look, we're supposed to have a fighting force in good shape. When I was in the Army, went through basic training. We did calisthenics. We had to eat right. We had to weigh a certain amount. All this stuff. The PC police have been involved in the military for too long, and Hegseth is absolutely right. I mean, even medals, the few medals I won, had to be measured and put on your uniform in a certain way. You had to wear your uniform in a certain way. It had to be clean. Your bed had to be made in the morning. Back in my dad's day in World War II, you had to be able to bounce a quarter off the blanket on the bed. That's how tight it had to be. You had regular inspections. There was discipline. All that went out the window during the woke era, and Hegseth is trying to bring it back, and he's right to do it.
Cal, I'd love for you to reflect for a few moments here on the peace deal that was announced, and it's rather extensive and extraordinary from President Trump after his meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu, and the coordination with all of those Arab nations who immediately endorsed the deal. It seems like the Hamas terrorists have sort of been put into a corner here on this.
It ain't going to happen, Larry. I mean, if you look back at the history of this and you look at what they say in their textbooks, teaching children to hate Jews, to kill Jews, giving them little phony toy weapons and dressing them as Palestinian terrorists, the sermons from their mosques, they quote their Quran saying that they're ordered by Allah to kill Jews and wipe out Israel. Now, how do you change all of that? And it's only going to take one violation for, now that Netanyahu has gotten the assurance from Trump that he'll back him all the way if they don't live up to this promise, which they haven't even announced they'll accept yet, by the way. We're still waiting on whether they're going to accept it or not. But they lie a lot and they cheat. So I give Trump full credit for and Netanyahu full credit for trying to do this. But just based on history, you know, there's a line you're required to use in when you're buying precious metals or stocks. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. In this case, it's the opposite.
Cal Thomas, it's always great to talk with you. You are Mr. October. Happy October 1st to you.
Thank you very much. Hey, I hear you're in Canada. Boy, I hope that starts a trend.
I will be leaving Montreal as soon as I possibly can, which is in about three hours after the show today.
My favorite street in Montreal is called the Côte de Neige, the Street of Snow. It's lovely. Have a pancake for me up there. They're really good.
Thank you, Cal.
All right, bye.
It is 6:43.
Mark Levin, weekdays 6 till 9 on 105.9 WMAL, making sense of the news.
Well, we have some fascinating news out of the Virginia governor's race. Latest poll, this is from A2 Insights, a very legit polling firm. They are showing a very close race right now for governor. In fact, it is the smallest lead Abigail Spanberger has had. She is now, according to this poll, at 48% to Winsome Earl Sears' 45%, a 3 percentage point margin in this latest poll, which is right at the margin of error. And I've been looking at this. First of all, Julie, this is the trend that we have seen in these polls.
Yes.
And this definitely seems to show that Winsome Earl Sears has the wind at her back going into these final weeks of the campaign. I've done the crosstab analysis on this that I want to bring some insights to, but what do you make of this? Is this what you're seeing on the ground in Virginia as well?
Yeah, look, I live, and obviously, you know, I talk about it all the time. I live in a deep blue area, and I don't see a lot of Spanberger signs. I don't think there's a tremendous amount of enthusiasm for her. And the number of scandals that have just piled up, particularly in Northern Virginia, which she refuses to address. She definitely has stuck her head in the sand. Whereas Winsome Sears she's going to school board meetings. She's actually going to these districts and talking to these school board officials and saying, this is outrageous. From the abortions being provided in Fairfax County, to the boys in Loudoun County, to the questionable financial behavior of one of the school board members in Fairfax. I mean, The scandals have piled up in these areas, and Winsome Sears isn't shying away. So I do think that people are tired of this. I do think that they see that Spanberger is not, she is sort of this, I always talk about the wolf in sheep's clothing, the radical in a Talbot's outfit, right? Yes. It's not working. She is not a moderate. She is a radical, and she will radicalize Virginia even more than it is now.
Yeah, if she were a true moderate, then she would actually speak to those issues that you just detailed, and she won't say a damn word about them. She's running from them because she doesn't want you to know how radical she is. Here's some interesting numbers here. First of all, by the way, I think the most important number was already given to you, not the fact that it's just a 3-point race, 48 to 45. What's most important is the undecideds. The fact that Abigail Spanberger has had no scrutiny from the media. She has been anointed and crowned not just as governor of Virginia, but they're already talking about her as being on a national ticket in 2028. They were so locked in and knew that Abigail Spanberger was going to win this one. It wasn't even close, right? That's what we've heard all year. Right. And yet with all of that support and all of that money and all of that great media, she can't hit 50%. She's still under 50%, and we're showing 6.5% in this poll undecided. You ask yourself right now, if you're a Virginia voter and you tell a pollster that you're undecided, see, to me, that's a Winsome Earl Sears voter who just won't say it out loud.
That's right.
And we see that with Trump. We see that with Republicans all the time in states like Virginia. That undecided number stays pretty sizable, and at the last minute they all break and end up as votes for the Republican because there's, a stigma at some point for saying out loud that you're voting for a Republican. I also want to point out one other thing in this poll. When you break it down male versus female, if you think about it for a second, when you talk about identity politics and you talk about, making sure that you have, I love Winsome Earl Sears, and the fact that she is a black woman literally has nothing to do with it. But it has been beaten into our head that if you want the female vote, you got to get a woman. If you want the black vote, you got to get a black. So you've got a black woman. You would think it would make a difference, right? Abigail Spanberger right now is winning amongst women by 10 points. Now, I understand they're both women, but it should be closer than 52 to 42% amongst women. Meanwhile, Sears is winning narrowly right now with men.
Well, I find it so fascinating, especially in Northern Virginia, where Spanberger has so much support, that most of the liberal women in Northern Virginia were all into this anti-racism movement, right? Yes. Well, if they really believed in that, then they would automatically support Winsome Sears, right? They would say, and in fact, they would tell Abigail Spanberger, you should step aside, because the very point that you are, the very act of going against Winsome Sears is a sign of your racism.
Your inherent racism.
I do find it fascinating that despite years of reading Kendi and Coates and Bettina Love, these women still support a white woman over a black woman.
That's right.
Seems
that's
kind
right.
of racist to me, Larry.
Put your diversity and inclusion where your mouth is. By the way, speaking of the racial breakdown, right now, whites favor Winsome Earl Sears over Abigail Spanberger, 51 to 43%. So the black candidate is doing better with whites, but those are mostly conservatives. Non-white voters are voting for the white woman, 60% to 26%.
Wow.
Now, 26% is pretty good for a Republican with non-white voters, but still, it sort of blows away this whole idea that, if you want to get black women voters, you need to nominate a black woman. No, we're not stupid sheep. We don't just say, it's someone who has my skin color, I'm going to vote for them. No, we actually look at where they stand on the issues and evaluate them as candidates. Imagine that. Treat us with more dignity and respect and intelligence, if you would, going forward. Meanwhile, the bottom line here, if you're Winsome Earl Sears, you are loving the trend in this election right now. Don't let up. Keep that foot on the gas. It is 6:53.